Rain fell in silver sheets, washing the neon glow of Seoul into a watercolor blur. It slicked the alleys of Jeonnyo-gu like black glass, reflecting the cold, indifferent lights of a city that never slept. Amira Cole pulled the collar of her thin coat tighter, the damp chill seeping into her bones. Her shift at the international clinic had run late, a tourist with broken wrist, a child with fever. And now, the walk home felt longer, lonelier. She was a trauma nurse from Atlanta, a world away. Here, she was just another foreigner, a face in the crowd, trying to outrun the ghosts she'd left behind by healing the wounds of strangers. Her sneakers splashed through a puddle, the sound swallowed by the city's hum. She passed a karaoke bar bleeding muffled bass into the street, then a shuttered market smelling of old fish and wilting flowers. This was her routine. Head down, walk fast, don't make eye contact. A sound cut through the rain's rhythm. Not a siren, not a backfiring truck. A screech of tires, sharp and desperate, followed by a heavy metallic thud. Amira froze. Her heart, a steady drum all day, kicked into a frantic sprint. Down the street, a black sedan had swerved, its headlights slicing through the downpour before it sped off, disappearing into the maze of wet streets. Walk away, Amira. Just keep walking. Her training screamed at her, a litany of protocols and emergency codes. But her feet were rooted to the pavement. From the mouth of a dark alley, a figure stumbled out, a shadow detaching itself from the deeper blackness. He collapsed against a brick wall, sliding down it slowly, leaving a dark smear in his wake. He was bleeding. Even from a distance, she could see it. The way his hand was pressed to his side, the unnatural slump of his shoulders. Her mind went into triage mode. Gunshot wound. Probable internal bleeding. Shock. This is not your city. This is not your fight. But compassion was a reflex she couldn't turn off. It was the reason she'd become a nurse, the reason she'd come to Seoul, to mend things, to put them back together. She took a breath, the cold air stinging her lungs, and ran toward him. He was slumped over, his face hidden in the shadows. The rain plastered his dark hair to his forehead. His suit, expensive and impeccably tailored, was ruined, soaked in rain and something darker. Blood. So much blood. "Hey!" she said softly, kneeling beside him. Her Korean was careful, clinical. "Can you hear me? I'm a nurse." He flinched, his head snapping up. His eyes, even clouded with pain, were sharp, intense. They fixed on her, not with gratitude, but with a kind of cold fury. "Go!" he rasped, the word a shard of glass. "You're bleeding heavily. You'll die if you don't get help." She didn't wait for permission. Her hands were already moving, tearing a strip from the silk lining of her coat. "I need to apply pressure." As she leaned in, he grabbed her wrist. His grip was surprisingly strong, a band of steel despite the life draining out of him. The touch was electric, a shock of heat in the cold rain. A silver chain glinted at his throat, a simple, elegant necklace half hidden beneath his collar. "You shouldn't have helped me," he whispered, his voice low and tight. It wasn't a warning. It was a regret. His regret for her. "Too late," she said, pulling her wrist free and pressing the makeshift bandage hard against the wound. He grunted, his body tensing, but he didn't stop her again. She pulled out her phone, her fingers slick with rain and his blood, and dialed for an ambulance. They promised 5 minutes. In this city, that could mean 20. The alley was a pocket of impossible silence. Just the sound of the rain, their breathing, and the wet, sticky press of her hands against his side. She could feel the frantic beat of his heart under her palm. He was losing too much time. "You'll live," she whispered, more to herself than to him. It was a promise she had no right to make, but it was all she had to give. His eyes were still on her, dark and unreadable. He looked at her not like a savior, but like a complication, a loose thread in a carefully woven tapestry of violence. In the distance, a siren began to wail a lonely, rising cry. It was getting closer. Too close. His gaze sharpened. "Police," he muttered. "A curse." He started to push himself up, ignoring the fresh wave of pain that contorted his face. "You need to go. Now." "What?" "I have to wait for the paramedics." "No," he insisted, his voice raw with urgency. "They can't find you here. With me." The implication hit her like a physical blow. The tailored suit, the gunshot, the aversion to police. This was not a simple mugging. This was something else entirely. Something dangerous. The siren screamed, echoing off the wet buildings. They were only a block away. He looked at her one last time, his eyes burning with an intensity that stole her breath. Disappear. And she did. She scrambled to her feet, her coat stained, her hands trembling. She backed away into the shadows and then ran, not looking back. She didn't stop until the sound of the sirens faded behind her, swallowed by the relentless rhythm of the Seoul rain. She told herself it was over, a single, terrifying night, an anomaly. But the next day, as she left her apartment building, a black car was waiting at the curb. It was the same model as the one that had sped away from the alley. It didn't move. It just sat there, its tinted windows like dark, patient eyes, watching her. Would you have walked away, or risked your life for a stranger in the dark? Comment below. The clinic was a sterile sanctuary of white walls and hushed efficiency. Amira moved through its halls like a ghost, changing dressings, checking vitals. The quiet rhythm to work a welcome balm after the chaos of the night before. She tried to scrub the memory of blood from her mind, the feeling of a stranger's life held beneath her hands. She almost succeeded, until he walked in. He moved with a quiet, predatory grace that seemed to suck the air out of the waiting room. The torn, blood-soaked suit was gone, replaced by another, charcoal gray, that fit his broad shoulders like a second skin. His hair was perfectly styled, and the face that had been pale and contorted with pain was now calm, composed, and devastatingly handsome. There was no sign of a wound, but Amira's hands instinctively remembered where it was. He stopped at the reception desk, his eyes scanning the room until they found her. A slow, deliberate smile touched his lips. It didn't reach his eyes. They were the same as she remembered, dark, sharp, and ancient with things she didn't want to understand. "I believe I owe you my life," he said, his voice a low, smooth murmur that carried across the quiet room. Her co-workers, Nurse Kim and Dr. Park, looked up, their curiosity piqued. Amira's heart hammered against her ribs. "He found me." "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice tight. He chuckled softly, a sound that was more threat than amusement. "Don't you? The alley, the rain, a very expensive coat ruined." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "My name is Jae-min." He said it simply, as if the name itself was an explanation, and in Seoul it was Jang Jae-min. She'd heard the whispers, the stories that slithered through the city's underbelly, a security empire built on shadows and fear. A gang leader who moved through the world of business and politics with the same ruthless efficiency he applied to the streets. He wasn't a businessman. He was a king in a kingdom of concrete and neon. "You saved me," he continued, his gaze unwavering. "That creates a debt. Tell me what you want. Money? A new apartment? A car? Name it." "I don't want anything," she said, forcing herself to meet his stare. "You owe me nothing. I'm a nurse. It's what I do." "But you didn't do it in a hospital," he countered, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "You did it in an alley for a man who told you to run. That's different." The next day, a mountain of orchids arrived at the clinic, their scent so overpowering it felt like an invasion. The card simply read, "For the nurse who isn't afraid of the dark." Nurse Kim's eyes went wide. "Amira, who is this man? He looks important." "He's no one," she lied, but the lie felt thin. He was anything but no one. He began to appear. Not always for her, but near her. A black car parked across the street from the clinic during her lunch break. A glimpse of him in a tailored coat, standing in the crowd at the subway station, just watching. He wasn't threatening. He was just there, a silent, constant presence. Protection, he called it. Amira called it cage. One night, exhausted and on edge, she was walking home when he stepped out of the shadows of her apartment building. She gasped, stumbling back. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "What are you doing here? This has to stop. The gifts, the cars, you're scaring me." "Good," he said without a trace of malice. "You should be scared. The men who did this to me now know a foreigner was there. They know someone helped me. You risked your life for me. Amira, let me at least keep you safe." His use of her name sent a chill down her spine. She'd never told him her name. "How do you know my name?" she whispered. He gave that small, dangerous smile again. "I know everything about you. Where you work, where you live, that you send money to your family in Atlanta every month, that you prefer coffee to tea." He took a step closer, the scent of expensive cologne and cold night air clinging to him. "I don't ask for your number, Amira, because I already have it." He pulled out his phone, and her contact information glowed on the screen. "Amira Cole, my savior." She stared at it, her breath catching in her throat. This wasn't gratitude. It was ownership. He wasn't repaying a debt. He was claiming it. He was claiming her. What begins as gratitude is about to cross a line. Don't forget to subscribe. You'll need to see how far he goes. The line between protection and possession blurred, then vanished completely. Jae Min's world began to bleed into hers, staining the clean, white edges of her life with shades of gray and crimson. It started with a threat. A rival gang, looking for leverage, decided the foreign nurse, who was always near Jae Min, was a weak point. Graffiti appeared on the clinic walls overnight. A coiled snake, their ugly signature. Then came the calls, heavy with menace. Dr. Park was ready to fire her, his fear overriding his loyalty. Before Mira could even pack her things, the problem was solved. Jae Min's solution was swift, silent, and brutal. She learned about it from the hushed whispers of her co-workers the next morning. The rival gang's headquarters had been hit. No one was killed, but the message was clear. The snake had been declawed. The graffiti was painted over. The call stopped. But when Amira looked in the mirror, she saw the faint outline of Jae Min's cage tightening around her. That night, there was a knock on her door. Not the polite rap of a neighbor, but a heavy, urgent fist. She knew who it was before she opened it. He was leaning against the frame, his beautiful suit jacket gone, his white shirt stained with fresh blood. A deep gash ran along his forearm, and his face was bruised, a split lip marring his perfect, cruel mouth. He looked not like a king, but like a soldier who had just walked off the battlefield. "They fought back," he said, his voice a low rasp. She stood there, frozen, her mind a war of duty and fear. "Don't let him in. Don't do this again." He looked at her, his dark eyes vulnerable for the first time. "You're the only one I trust to touch me." The words broke through her defenses. With a sigh that felt like a surrender, she stepped aside and let him in. Her small apartment felt even smaller with him in it. He filled the space with his presence, with the scent of blood and rain and danger. She worked in silence, her movements practiced and efficient. She cleaned the gash, stitched the skin with a steady hand she didn't feel, and bandaged the wound. He sat on her sofa, perfectly still, his eyes following her every move. The silence was electric. It hummed with everything they weren't saying. The air grew thick, charged with the proximity of their bodies. As she taped the final piece of gauze, her fingers brushed against the warm skin of his arm. A jolt went through her, sharp and undeniable. His breath hitched. She looked up, and he was already looking at her, his gaze so intense it felt like a physical touch. The space between them shrank to nothing. She could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, feel the heat radiating from his body. "You scare me," she whispered, the confession torn from her throat. His eyes dropped to her lips. A muscle in his jaw tightened. "Then stop looking at me like that," he answered, his voice rough. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Her heart was a trapped bird beating against her ribs. Fear and fascination were tangled so tightly inside her she couldn't tell them apart. His lips were a breath away from hers when her hands began to shake. A violent, uncontrollable tremor. The movement broke the spell. She pulled back, clutching her hands to her chest as if to still her racing heart. He watched her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he stood, the moment of vulnerability gone, replaced by his usual mask of cool control. He walked to the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. He turned back to look at her, the silver necklace at his throat catching the dim light. "You saved my life twice now," he said, his voice quiet but absolute. "That makes it yours, too." He left, closing the door softly behind him, leaving her alone in the wreckage of her own resolve, the scent of his blood still lingering in the air. Amira ran. She found a new job at a small private practice on the other side of the city. She changed her number. She moved into a tiny, anonymous apartment in a neighborhood he would never think to look. For 2 weeks, she breathed freely for the first time in months. The air tasted of liberation. She told herself she was free, that she had cut the cord. She was wrong. He found her. Of course, he found her. She was walking home from her new clinic when a black car pulled up beside her. The window rolled down, and there he was, looking at her not with anger, but with a kind of wounded confusion. "You don't understand," he said, his voice laced with desperation she had never heard before. "I can't lose what saved me." The cage slammed shut again, tighter this time. His men, discreet shadows in dark suits, reappeared at a distance. Flowers began arriving at her new job, more opulent than before. A new coat, identical to the one she ruined for him, was delivered to her apartment, a silent, mocking replacement. She threw the gifts away, but they were a message. "I am always here. You cannot escape me." This was not protection. This was a haunting. Her anger, simmering for weeks, finally boiled over. She took a taxi to Gangnam, to the gleaming glass tower that housed his legitimate empire. She stormed past the bewildered receptionist, taking the private elevator to the top floor. His penthouse was a sterile masterpiece of glass and chrome, with a panoramic view of the city he owned. He was standing by the window, a glass of whiskey in his hand, as if he'd been expecting her. "You think this is love," she yelled, her voice echoing in a vast, empty space. "This is control. This is obsession. I am not a possession you can guard." He turned slowly, his eyes dark, hollowed out by sleepless nights. "And you think I know the difference?" He set the glass down and walked toward her, each step measured, deliberate. "Before you, there was only control, only power. You made me feel something else. You made me feel human." He was in front of her now, so close she could feel the heat of his anger, his desperation. "You call it obsession. I call it survival." "I can't breathe, Jae-min. You're suffocating me." "Then let me breathe for you," he whispered, and before she could react, he kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was a collision, hard, desperate, broken. It was a kiss of a drowning man, full of rage and need and a terrifying, possessive tenderness. For a split second, She gave in, her body betraying her, melting against the force of his desire. The taste of whiskey and sorrow filled her mouth. Then she pushed him away, shoving at his chest with all her strength. No, she was trembling, her lips still burning from his. Your confusing need with love. He looked at her, his own breath ragged, his composure finally shattered. A flash of lightning outside illuminated the raw vulnerability on his face. Then teach me the difference, he whispered. The words hung between them, a plea and a challenge, a prayer and a demand. They stood there, two fractured people in a glass tower, trembling between the danger they knew and a desire that could save them both or destroy them completely. This is the point where love becomes a trap. Would you run or try to change him? Tell us below. The decision was made in the quiet, desperate hours before dawn. Love could not be taught like a lesson. It couldn't be forced from a man whose entire world was built on violence. She couldn't change him, and she couldn't live in his cage, no matter how gilded. She planned her escape with the precision of a surgeon. A flight booked under a different name. A bag packed with only the essentials. She would work one last shift, collect her final paycheck, and vanish. This time for good. He sensed it. He must have. Because hours before her shift was due to end, he was there, not at the clinic, but at her apartment door, bleeding again. It was worse this time. An ambush. His rivals had finally grown bold. He was slumped against her door, his suit shredded, a deep wound in his shoulder, his face a mask of blood and exhaustion. He had come to the only sanctuary he knew. Tears pricked her eyes as she dragged him inside. Tears of frustration, of pity, of a love she couldn't afford to feel. She worked silently, her hands moving with an aching familiarity, cleaning and stitching, bandaging his broken body one last time. "You can't keep living like this," she said, her voice thick with unshed sorrow. "One day, I won't be here to patch you up. One day, you won't make it to my door." He reached up, his hand weak, and caught hers. His thumb stroked her skin. "Then stay," he pleaded, his voice a raw whisper. "Stay, Amira, and I'll leave it all. I swear it." She looked into his eyes, and for the first time, she saw not a gang leader, not a king, but just a man terrified of losing the only light he'd ever known, and she believed he meant it. In that moment, he truly believed he could walk away from the violence, from the power, from the blood. But she knew better. It was all he knew. It was who he was. "You won't," she said softly, her heart breaking as she said it. "You can't, and that's why I have to go." She pulled her hand from his grasp. He didn't try to stop her. He just watched as she picked up her packed bag from the corner of the room. He watched as she walked to the door. He was still on the floor, wounded and alone, when she looked back one last time. His eyes were hollow, defeated. In his hand, he clutched the silver necklace from his throat, its delicate chain glinting in the dim morning light. A debt he could never repay. A claim he could no longer enforce. She walked out and didn't look back. Outside, the first light of dawn was breaking over Seoul. The city lights began to blur as the rain started to fall again, soft and cleansing. Freedom and heartbreak merged into one, washing over her, washing him away. He said, "I saved his life, but now I'm learning how to save mine." Should Amira trust him again or vanish for good? Comment below and subscribe for episode 2, The Gang Leader's Promise.